Welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. My name is Linda Thompson, and I'm a member of the Worship Associates Ministry at the church. I want to welcome each of you to our Sunday online service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you came to worship with us today, you are welcome here. Our minister is Thom Belote. Today we have a guest preacher, Jody Savage. Jody's sermon is called The Far Side of Denial. It is the first sermon of this year's Preaching Practicum class. And now please join us in singing the opening hymn, For All That Is Our Life. The words for the chalice lighting come from Dag Hammarskjöld. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and give back.
The second time she was diagnosed with cancer, the poet Audre Lorde wrote a book called A Burst of Light. In that book, Lorde, who is an African-American lesbian, reflected on our common mortality despite our different paths of oppression and privilege. Lorde wrote, "Living with cancer has forced me to jettison the myth of omnipresence, of believing or loosely asserting that I can do anything, along with any dangerous illusion of immortality. Neither of these defenses is a solid base for either political activism or personal struggle. But in their place, another kind of power is growing, tempered and enduring, grounded within the realities of what I am in fact doing. An open-eyed, appreciation, and assessment of what I can and do accomplish using who I am and who I most wish myself to be. To stretch as far as I can go and relish what is satisfying rather than what is sad, building a strong and elegant pathway toward transition.
I've decided to be happy. I've decided to be glad. I've decided to be grateful for all I ever had. I've decided to let go of all this pain tonight. I've decided to let go of all these demons inside. I know I am blessed. I know all I ever wanted was this. I know I don't need more. I've got what I came for. I've decided to be open to that little voice inside, telling me I'm beautiful. It's okay to be alive. I've decided to be kinder to myself when I feel sad. I've decided to be grateful for all I ever had. I know I am blessed. I know all I ever wanted was this. I know I don't need more. I've got what I came for.
Each week in our service, we hold a time for the sharing of our joys and sorrows. This past week, a couple of joys and sorrows were sent to me. The first stone this morning is placed by Amy Maddox for a joy. This past spring, Amy was being recruited for a position at the University of Connecticut. And after months of research, Zoom calls, remote presentations, and discernment, Amy says that she has decided to stay here at UNC in biology. Amy says, "I'm grateful to many people, especially my department chair, who helped me to feel valued at UNC." Amy, let me just say, I am overjoyed to know that you're going to be staying here in Chapel Hill. Next stone is placed this morning for a sorrow. Buddy Olney, Reverend Buddy Olney, who served this church as minister from 1988 to 1992, passed away on Monday at the age of 80. We hold Reverend Olney's wife, Peggy, their children, and their grandchildren in our hearts and in our prayers. Thank you, Reverend Olney, for your ministry and for your service. Final stone is placed this morning for all those joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts that were not spoken. I invite you to pray with me. Spirit of life and love, on this Independence Day weekend, in this embattled and imperfect nation, We search for some perspective, some change, some transformation, that we might live up to our highest ideals and values and aspirations. We pray for open eyes, along with open hearts. Help us to truly see the truth of ourselves, of our history, of our legacy. We ask that the masks we wear not go over our eyes. Take away our denial. We who would celebrate a revolution nearly 250 years ago might recognize that that impulse to evolution and change lies at the heart of who we are, that is the part of our inheritance we must value and treasure. So help us not to venerate a dead past that does not serve the cause of liberation and human flourishing. Give us the courage to change ourselves and to make the necessary changes to build a better and more just country, society, and world. With this spirit in our hearts, mindful of all of the prayers of ourselves and this community, we say, Amen, and blessed be.
It is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker. Jody Savage is a lifelong UU who joined the community church soon after she and her partner Graham arrived in their U-Haul from California at the end of 2018. Jody is retired from a quarter century as a writer in biotechnology. She has published 2 books under pen names and is working on a third. Jody has 4 children and 3 grandchildren on 2 coasts.
I want to talk with you today about the mix of joy and woe that is our life. And I want to talk with you about denial, how humans choose not to believe in the struggles of others, and how we outgrow denial as our spirits grow. I want to talk with you about the pandemic, how it opened our eyes to our mutual mortality, so that we could better see the reality of the oppression of others. And I want to talk with you about the duty of imperfect and broken humans to take care of ourselves, our bodies, so that we can keep bearing witness to the demands of justice. In the midst of industrialization, when the dark satanic mills were overtaking England, the poet William Blake wrote, "Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine." Life is indeed a mix of joy and woe, but how easy it is to see our own woes and how difficult to see the struggles of others. In February 1981, I gave birth to twin sons, 2 months before they were due. How joyful to become a mother of sons, and how difficult that they spent their first 2 months in intensive care. Although my sons are identical, their development took different paths. One of my baby boys learned to sit up and stand and walk. My other son moved differently. He turned out to have cerebral palsy, and to this day he rides a power wheelchair. But my first response when he was a baby was to deny what I saw. He'll grow out of it, I thought. They were born early, he'll catch up. My next response was to wonder why the universe was inconveniencing me. Not my son, but me. And I'll admit, I still fell into those feelings at times over the years as I dressed my son each day, lifted him into his wheelchair, and drove him to elementary school, then middle school, then high school. I had those feelings even though my son was the person growing up with the great inconvenience of having a disability. And even though I had a husband and an au pair and had the means to buy a wheelchair-accessible house and a wheelchair lift van. We lived in Berkeley, and when my son turned 7, he began playing power wheelchair soccer. At team practices, I met another mother of twins. Her identical sons both played wheelchair sports because they both had cerebral palsy. She was a single mom who rented a small apartment, and their family relied on public transit. Yet there they were at every practice. When the team traveled to Arizona for a national tournament, there they were. When the team traveled to Birmingham for an international championship, there they were. It took meeting this family to jolt me out of self-pity and into the beginnings of empathy for other parents and for people with disabilities who spend their lives fighting for access to buildings and institutions. Almost 40 years have passed since my sons were born, and I still work on my own ableism. When I stopped making my son's disability all about me, I began to read a lot. I sat at the UCSF Medical School Library and read everything I could about cerebral palsy. When my son was young, lots of school buildings, including the Berkeley High Library, only had steps, not ramps. I helped organize a parents group that went to the school board and petitioned for better access. They kept promising they would help our kids as soon as they could fit it into the budget. Finally, somebody slipped us an old newspaper article about another parents group that had gotten that same runaround 10 years earlier. That was when we sued the schools and won, although some parents of able-bodied kids were angry at us for making a fuss. But notice how I started with denial. Humans use denial as a way of coping with our losses, with our mortality, so we are not overwhelmed by suffering. The problem is, denial robs us of empathy. Denial makes other people less real to us. And I've learned that overcoming my denial about one kind of struggle does not mean I understand other forms of oppression. Working on my ableism didn't mean I was awakened to my own homophobia. In my 40s, after my divorce, I began a relationship with a woman. I resented that we got flack for holding hands in restaurants. It took time to get over myself and realize other people were losing jobs and homes and custody of their children because of who they loved. And then, working on my homophobia didn't mean I was awakened to my own ageism. In my 60s, I resented that it grew harder to get a technical writing job, but I was happy to switch over to writing whatever I wanted for fun. I had to check myself and realize that not every older person has the luxury of pursuing their dreams instead of a job. Each challenge has required self-examination and self-education before I could begin to be an advocate. Why wasn't I truly awake to any of these challenges before I experienced them? Because I didn't have to be. Because it's harder to see the privilege I enjoy than the privilege I've lost. Because denial is easy and seductive, and to see another person struggle is hard and uncomfortable. I made the right progressive noises, but as long as ableism or homophobia or ageism did not affect me, as long as it was something that happened to them, I was not fired up. As the poet Audre Lorde wrote, to acknowledge privilege is a first step in making it available for wider use. Each of us is blessed in some particular way, whether we recognize our blessings or not. But we cannot learn every form of struggle through personal experience. If we are to grow beyond denial, at some point we must get past our daily lives and learn what we can about what others face. And to help us recognize each other's struggles, along came the year 2020, the year when the same crisis is happening to everyone. The pandemic split open our denial because it put our mutual mortality right in our faces. As the year began, the coronavirus seemed so remote, a disease on the other side of the planet. It was easy to live in denial, until one day it wasn't. You probably remember the day you locked down. For me, it was March 6th, the day the first case was diagnosed in my town. At noon, I was crammed into Merritt Bakery for 45 minutes with a crowd of people waiting for takeout, wondering whether a really great bacon sandwich was worth dying for. I went home and put sticky notes on the bottoms of all my favorite possessions with the names of which of my children should get what when I died. Suddenly, I remembered I was mortal and so was everybody else. After her second cancer diagnosis, Audre Lorde wrote, "As a living creature, I am part of two kinds of forces, growth and decay, sprouting and withering, living and dying, and at any given moment in our lives, each one of us is actively located somewhere along a continuum between those two forces." Suddenly, because of the pandemic, we all had to reassess where we were in that continuum. 2 months after I labeled my prized possessions, I read an article about a family in Orlando. Both parents lost their jobs when the pandemic closed Disney World. They were unable to access the overwhelmed unemployment system, and so they lost their home. The parents and their 2 children were living in their car. They had no prized possessions to label in case of their demise. I've never been homeless, but that family is real to me. I can see them when I go to sleep at night. The children coping the best they can, the parents tamping down their fears and being brave for their children. This pandemic is happening to everyone in the world. We are in different boats, but on the same ocean, connected in ways that were invisible until COVID-19. Audre Lorde said, "I know that my people cannot possibly profit from the oppression of any other group which seeks the right to peaceful existence. Rather, we diminish ourselves by denying to others what we have shed blood to obtain for our children. And those children need to learn that they do not have to become like each other in order to work together for a future they will all share. I believe that awakening to our mutual peril is why so many people were moved to action by the terrible death of George Floyd. I believe that is why so many brave men and women faced down the dual perils of brutality and pandemic to call for change, for reform, for a recognition that justice is due for all of us. All of us, whether or not we have the experience of oppression that African Americans face, we know we cannot let oppression of our fellow humans stand. I believe this difficult time has become a crucible of spiritual growth. Many people right now are taking the risk of accepting the reality of others' struggles. I saw a photo of a sign carried by a white woman at a recent protest. Her sign said, "I'm sorry I'm late. I had a lot to learn." And there is always more to learn. I'm sorry I was late to disability activism. I'm sorry I was late to pride. I'm sorry I was late to anti-ageism. And I'm sorry I am late to anti-racism. I am still at the reading and learning stage, but from taking up other causes, I know this. First, I have benefited from the exclusion of others. I have enjoyed unearned advantages that were invisible to me. In a country where the average white family has 10 times the wealth of the average family of color, it's no coincidence that my son had a wheelchair lift van, while his twin teammates, who were African American, did not. In a country where the average white family has twice the income of the average family of color, it's no coincidence that my grandchildren sleep in beds at night, while that African American family in Orlando sleeps in a car. Second, it is powerful to witness and acknowledge the struggle of others. Not my feelings about their struggle, but the struggle itself. Third, we are much more powerful together. Even those of us who have taken the easy way out for too long can add our numbers to that power. Fourth, the oppression of any is the oppression of all. Fifth, blessings continue even during a pandemic, even during a time of great injustice, and all are worthy of those blessings. All humans are imperfect. We are all late to grasp the struggles faced by some group of our fellow humans, but our imperfection, our belated recognition of others' suffering, and our continued need to learn and grow do not take away from the contribution we can make together. Our numbers are powerful. I want each and every one of the brave people protesting racism and oppression to be healthy and strong in November. They are essential, and so are each of us. Our first job in this time of pandemic must be to take care of ourselves. We are in this for the long haul. COVID-19 and racism are not going away tomorrow, so we must protect ourselves from COVID-19 even as we learn to fight racism. Talking about her cancer, Audre Lorde wrote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." The same could be said for each of us in the time of coronavirus. We have a duty to take care of ourselves because our survival to support change is a political act. And we have a duty to remember this time when the pandemic broke through our denial and to maintain empathy and activism. Denial is a limited form of self-care. Far better to hold the dualities of blessings and brokenness, of our own failings and our capacity for good, of the reality that the world will break your heart and everyone else's, even while it fills you with joy. Far better to recognize how we have failed and then live to do better another day. What we do now and what we do in the months and years to come is important. We must bear witness to the requirements of justice for all humans, including ourselves and everyone else. Blessed be.
May I suggest to you, may I suggest this is the best part of your life. May I suggest this time is blessed for you. This time is blessed and shining almost blinding bright. Just turn your head and you'll begin to see the thousand reasons that were just beyond your sight. The reasons why I suggest to you, why I suggest this is the best part of your life. There is a world that's been addressed to you, intended only for your eyes. A secret world, a treasure chest to you, of private scenes and brilliant dreams that mesmerize. A lover's trusting smile, a tiny baby's hands, the million stars that fill the turning sky at night. Oh, I suggest to you, oh, I suggest this is the best part of your life. There is a hope that's been expressed in you, the hope of 7 generations, maybe more. This is the faith that they invest in you. It's that you'll do one better than was done before. Inside you know, inside you understand, inside you know what's yours to finally set right. Oh, I suggest to you, oh, I suggest this is the best part of your life. This is a song, comes from the west to you, comes from the west, comes from the slowly setting sun, with a request of you, to see how very short the endless days will run. And when they're gone, and when the dark descends, oh, we'd give anything for one more hour of light. May I suggest this is the best part of your life.
This is a Share the Plate Sunday, and these words are spoken on behalf of Brenda Rogers. Our Share the Plate offering today supports our partnership with the Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice and the Right Here, Right Now project, which our Love team launched back in February. UUs for Social Justice is based in the DC metro area and mobilizes Unitarian Universalists from across the country in advocacy efforts. As a partner with UUs for Social Justice, we are asked to contribute financially to support its work. Our voices are amplified by working with other congregations, and together we've delivered over 10,000 letters to senators and congressmen in their DC offices. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to advocate and act on behalf of our principles. Priority issues for the Right Here, Right Now project are immigration justice, economic justice, environmental and climate justice, and defending our democracy. Our July letter will address our first principle, our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and will be framed around racial justice and policing issues that are actionable at the federal level. If you believe that our Unitarian Universalist principles demand action through advocating with policymakers and elected officials, then I ask you to support our partnership with a donation in this morning's Share the Plate and your participation in the July letter writing campaign. More information about that campaign will be coming out soon. To give to this morning's Share the Plate, you can use the giving portal below and select Share the Plate. An offering for this morning's Share the Plate for Unitarian Universalists for social justice and to support the Right Here, Right Now project will be both generously given and gratefully received.
Right.
This reading is by the Reverend Mark Belletini, who led the hymnal commission for the Gray Hymnal. Go in peace. Live simply, gently, at home in yourselves. Act justly. Speak justly. Remember the depth of your own compassion. Forget not your power in the days of your powerlessness. Do not desire to be wealthier than your peers, and stint not your hand of charity. Practice forbearance. Speak the truth, or speak not. Take care of yourselves as bodies, for you are a good gift. Crave peace for all people in the world, beginning with yourselves, and go as you go, with the dream of that peace alive in your heart. Blessed be.
Please join with me in the words by which we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now please join in singing Shalom.
Shalom, my friend, shalom, my friend, shalom, shalom. We'll meet again, shalom.